Hey, what's up everybody? It's Rock from Smoke Q. Today I'm making these party ribs, and I gotta tell you, I was shocked at how well these turned out. They took less time than usual, and they still turned out juicy and delicious. You gotta check this recipe out. To get started, I remove these baby back ribs from their package, and like many other recipes, I begin by removing the membrane. I personally always like to remove the membrane as it allows for more seasoning to be applied to the underside of the ribs, as well as more smoke to penetrate while these ribs are on the smoker. Now that I have the membrane removed, I take a sharp knife. Here I'm using my Messermeister Oliva 8-inch chef's knife, and I begin by cutting in between each of the bones to separate the ribs into individual sections. As I get each rib separated, I'm placing them into this large mixing bowl because I'm going to apply a binder and some rubs. But this is an optional step, and you can choose to skip this and just apply direct seasoning once you get them all cut up. Now, something else worth noting. In this recipe, I've chosen baby backs and not spare ribs. I did this as baby backs are typically a little bit thicker and have a little more meat on them compared to spare ribs. I will say this is a recipe I'm planning to try on some spare ribs to see if there's much of a difference. On this last rib, you'll see that I'm using my fingers to feel where those end bones are so I can still get a good cut in between. And after one final inspection, I toss that last rib in the bowl before cutting up that second slab of ribs I'm preparing. Now with 2 slabs cut and placed into the bowl, I'm ready to begin by applying my mustard binder. As with all my other rib recipes, binders are certainly optional, and mustard in this case will actually not impact the flavor profile. But I always feel like it allows the rubs and seasonings to adhere and stick just a little bit better. I also feel like it helps to break down some of those fibers and gives the rib just a more desirable texture. With the binder applied, I do apply a light layer of my Rock's coffee rub and then also a light layer of my Rock's honey chipotle rub. This is a very similar technique to what I use on my crispy chicken wings recipe, where I apply a little bit of rub directly to the binder applied ribs that are in the bowl. As I continue to prep, I'm going to apply a heavy dose of rub on both sides, so if you're in a hurry, this bowl application is certainly a step that you can feel free to skip. With my binder incorporated and both of my rubs sprinkled in there, I do take my hands and try and mix everything up as well as I can to try and get a nice even coat around all of the ribs before I eventually take them out to season them individually. So now I'm ready to place each rib individually on my cutting board, and this is where my American Flag XL rosewood block cutting board gives me enough space to knock out the biggest recipes that I try to take on. So now with all of them placed on one side, I apply a heavy layer of my coffee rub. I like this rub on ribs as it's given a bit of an earthy umami taste with all the coffee, paprika, and cumin flavors. Next, I apply a heavy dose of my honey chipotle on each row as well. This spice blend brings in a sweet element from the honey, but then also adds a layer of delicious smokiness from that chipotle flavor. Once I get my heavy dose of the coffee rub and honey chipotle, I go ahead and flip over each rib, trying to get them to lay into that overcast to soak up some of that leftover rub. And now with all of them flipped over, I do apply another heavy dose of my coffee rub and then another heavy dose of my honey chipotle rub. As with all my recipes, I'm just showcasing rubs that I make and personally like. I know that they're going to have a good, clean, fresh ingredients, but this is a great opportunity to weave in different flavor profiles by using different rubs. But if you want to stay with the same flavor profile but use different rubs, 2 of the rubs I'd suggest are Whiskey Bent's The Grind for the coffee substitute, and then Heath Ryle's Honey Chipotle for the honey chipotle substitute. So now that I have all my seasoning applied, I place each individual rib on my Traeger Ironwood 885, and I'm going to run these at 275 for the whole cook. The biggest thing that I'm trying to keep in mind as I place these on the smoker is that I want to give as much space around each of the individual ribs as I can, making sure none of them are touching each other. This space allows them to get a good even cook, but also allows the smoke to infuse flavor all around them. After the ribs have cooked for 1 hour, I opened up the smoker and flipped all of them over to get a nice even cook on both sides. I don't know that this is a required step, but it's just one that I elected to do. But once I flipped them all over, I closed the lid and cooked for another 30 minutes. After a total of 1 hour and 30 minutes, I use my ThermaPen 1 to check for an internal temp of somewhere around 170 to 175, and that's when I'm ready to pull them off and place them into an aluminum pan. I'm doing this so that I can bring them over to my prep table and apply a wrap mixture before finishing off this cook. This mixture I went with is going to be similar to my wrap mix that I've done for my very popular 2-2-1 rib recipe. So this mixture, I'm going to start with a few tablespoons of butter that I'm going to slice up and then apply to each of the pans. After the butter, I then grab a good handful of brown sugar and get that sprinkled on top before finishing off with a medium drizzle of just some regular honey. Again, this is the same flavor profile that I use in my 2-2-1 rib recipe, so you know it's going to be good. The last thing I do, and certainly not least, is that I apply a pretty heavy dose of my Smoked Q Rock's Irish Whiskey Barbecue Sauce to each of the pans of ribs. I really like this flavor profile as it kind of makes it a sweet and savory profile. To be honest, I actually ended up with almost a candied kind of flavor profile. And this is certainly an area that you can use your judgment and take on whatever flavors that you really want to incorporate into this dish. Whether that be including different ingredients, maybe not as many of the ingredients, or even a different brand of barbecue sauce. Just kind of do whatever tickles your fancy and whatever you're interested in. But now that I've got all those ingredients applied, I did use my hands to mix everything up together a little bit. And I'm doing my best to make sure everything is incorporated very well before I cover these up with aluminum foil to place them back on the smoker in the pans for another 45 minutes until my ribs are reading 200 to 203 degrees. At that internal temperature, I know that they're gonna have that right texture and that right tug off the bone finish. So like I said, at 203, I pulled them off, let them rest for a few minutes, then stacked them on a plate. I'm telling you, these things turned out a lot better than I really expected them to. I was really happy when I jumped in for that first bite and really kind of surprised, to be honest. I gave them that wow and that's money. I mean, these ribs are one that I'm actually gonna put into my rotation of different rib recipes. Now, if you've made it this far, I really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe so you can stay up to date on all my backyard pitmaster recipes. I really can't thank you enough.